Good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, this is June 27th, 178th day of the year. Just 187 days remaining the year's over with. Holidays and observances. Multiculturalism Day, National Ice Cream Cake Day, National Cream Tea Day, and a National Pineapple Day. Who comes up with these things? It is National Bingo Day, World of Rock Day. It's a Middle Eastern drink that packs the punch. National Sunglasses Day, National Dream Big Day, Industrial Workers of the World Day, National Safer Workplace Day, National Women's Fly Fishing Day, Drive Your Corvette to Work Day. Oh, I'd do that. PTSD Awareness Day, National HIV Testing Day, National Food Truck Day, National Onion Day, Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises Day, Helen Keller Day, National Orange Blossom Day, Self-Storage Week, Deaf Blind Awareness Week, Bum Bum You Bow, Insect Week, Rabbit Week, National Lightning Safety Awareness Week, English Wine Week, Windjammer Days, National Forgiveness Day Week, famous people born on this date: Helen Keller, Khloe Kardashian, and Tobey Maguire. All right, well, let's see what's in the news. Trump wins over a lifelong Democratic auto worker with the big, beautiful bill, vehicle loan tax benefit. Ford workers of 26 years stands with the president as he unveils a tax deduction for American-made vehicles. He just recognized a third-generation auto worker from Michigan on Thursday. Trump administration has taken action after a massive fraud has been uncovered at an agency Democrats are trying to protect from DOJ. I'm, of course, talking about the USAID. Apparently, it was a piggy bank Democrats could dip into whenever they wanted to. And that's how we've got people who came into office being a little bit above bankrupt and becoming millionaires. Look at Nancy Pelosi, worth $120 million. And the most she made in a year was $250,000. Well, New York City real estate developer schools Mamdani over a pricey housing plan. The developer called Progressive Assemblyman's $100 billion proposal on attack on those who build housing. Zoran Mamdani is the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City. And he's upset a whole lot of folks with some of his off-the-wall plans. The Chinese agro-terrorism could threaten U.S. survival as a nation, according to experts. According to Christopher Healy, America must prepare for potential agricultural attacks from foreign adversaries. 2 Chinese nationals were accused of smuggling a crop-killing fungus across the border. One expert warned that agro-terrorism from foreign adversaries could in fact cause a severe disruption to the United States. I find it interesting when you walk into the grocery store how many empty shelves are sitting there. Yeah. President Trump neutralized Iran, but there's still one big Middle Eastern threat looming on the horizon. Hezbollah sleeper cells across America pose an imminent threat. The Hezbollah, of course, is Iranian-backed, and Hezbollah is responsible for the death of more Americans than the terrorist organization. Since the late 70s, Hezbollah has maintained a well-documented presence in the U.S., mainly for fundraising, and these so-called sleeper units can instantly morph into violent, lethal operational cells. Harris campaign is being accused of lying about an interview set up by a comedian podcast host. Comedian Andrew Schultz claims Harris campaign blatantly lied about setting up a podcast interview. He said he reached out to several Kamala Harris surrogates like Mark Cuban and Charlemagne the God. Montana congressman stands firm against the Senate measure as Trump is pushing for passage. House Republican opposes his proposed sale of the public land, saying he's still against Senate bill. He says, I say no. He served as Interior Secretary during part of Trump's first term. NASA's Mars rover has uncovered bizarre formations that have got scientists puzzled. Unusual boxwork patterns on Mars. They're believed to be linked to ancient waterways. These formations suggest water once flowed beneath the red planet's surface. Well, the tick population has exploded, puts Americans at risk for more than just Lyme disease. There's also alpha-gal syndrome and tick paralysis, which pose a serious health risk. Bezos' $500 million yacht proposal leads to a lavish Italian wedding as a A-list of guests. Michelle Obama back in the news. She tells parents they have to get tougher on kids' social media despite the pain it causes. She compared taking away kids' social media to taking away the substance from the addict. And of course, she is a complete total expert in raising your children. Condoleezza Rice, ex-Secretary of State, calls the U.S. strikes on Iran a shot in the arm for American credibility. She says crippling Iran is good for the region. Well, a Reagan-appointed judge defends the role that judges have taken as threats reach historic highs. Ex-Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy pleads for civil political discourse. He warns democracy is at risk. But as long as we have God's anointed telling us what God wants us to do, we're good. Sean Hannity had some comments about a new low for Democrats. An armed Texas woman sat in a lawn chair on a busy highway during an hours-long standoff with police. Eventually, she surrendered and was taken into custody before being transported to a hospital for evaluation. Harris County Constable Precinct 4 deputies responded Thursday afternoon to a report of an armed woman who was involved in a crash involving an 18-wheeler on I-45 South in Spring, Texas. The woman and the driver of the truck were unharmed in the incident. After the collision, she got out of her vehicle with a chair and sat down in the middle of the highway. She was armed with a handgun and refused to drop it. Former prosecutors warned an immediate leak could save the Idaho College massacre suspect. Brian Kohlberger could escape the death penalty because of leaked evidence aired during a TV episode. That's from a former prosecutor. Still may be convicted, but not the death penalty. Well, Diddy's right-hand woman been compared to Epstein's confidant. She said to be provocative but weak. Christina K.K. Coram allegedly helped transport drugs and cover up hotel attacks. The View co-host Joy Behar wants Trump's Iran strikes to have been successful. She doesn't think they are because she didn't give her approval for them. Well, the Biden debate meltdown caused an earthquake across the social media landscape. Mike Tyson and Kevin Durant urged Trump to fix the marijuana laws after what they're calling the Biden betrayal. They call for clemency for nonviolent marijuana offenders and rescheduling of cannabis after Biden's actions. An Iranian illegal migrant who had previously self-deported himself picked up after he refused to be arrested by ICE in Texas. Jamil Baluli skipped a scheduled immigration appointment after being deported once before. The Biden revolving door is still working. Let's see. Well, a man confronted a woman who had a dog with her inside a coffee shop. Sparked a heated debate, both verbally and on social media. He was accused of acting improperly for questioning the woman about her dog. He was sitting in a chair in the coffee shop. On the door was a clear no pet sign. It wasn't a service animal. So he wanted to know why the dog was there. Now, GOP lawmakers are questioning our readiness for a potential disastrous drone threat. As long as there's boys with BB guns, we can take care of those drones. Well, Trump administration is squaring off this University of Virginia over DEI. University's president, James Ryan, hadn't dismantled its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. University of Wisconsin at Madison funded a student sex club to the tune of nearly $136,000. I've got 5 degrees from several universities, and none of them had a sex club. I feel left out. Well, the medical examiners finally released the cause of death of the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson. He suffered from multiple health conditions, including sepsis and chronic kidney disease. Suspect accused in the anti-Israel firebombing been hit with more federal hate crime charges. The feds are making it clear they've had enough of that. The largest Patriot engagement in history, which was when Iran attacked the Middle Eastern base. "44 soldiers between the ages of 21 and 28 were defending the base with just 2 Patriot missile systems, and they won. And let's see, we got anything else? All right, I think Anna Wintour, for those who care about Vogue magazine, is taking a step back from power. Okay, let's see what we got. You know, we've been talking about a lot of UFO incidents, and there have been a number of them over the years, explained away variously as weather balloons and just your imagination. But there's a whole lot more to it than that. And we're going to start out talking about the Lakenheath-Bentwaters incident, which took place in August of 1956 in the UK. It involved several testimonies from radar operators and pilots from the British and American Air Forces, reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in the sky of eastern England. And prior to this, the period was marked by intense Cold War activity, where aerial surveillance was at its peak, particularly due to the fear there's going to be a Soviet attack. The Lakenheath and Bentwaters air bases, used by the U.S. Air Force and the Royal Air Force, were strategic points of defense and surveillance in this region. And on the night of this incident, the weather conditions were clear, allowing for detailed visual and radar observation of the reported phenomena. The events of that night were recorded and analyzed, but still remain shrouded in mystery to this day, fueling various theories and speculations about the nature and origin of the observed object. This case involves several testimonies from radar operators and pilots and ground witnesses, provide a series of technical and visual details that flesh out the narrative, so to speak. And the observation began about 9:30 in the evening, when a radar operator at the Royal Air Force stationed at Lakenheath in Suffolk, England, detected an unidentified signal on his radar screen. That signal was moving irregularly and at a speed far exceeding that of conventional aircraft at the time. The radar operator described the object as having extremely agile behavior, capable of changing directions at acute angles and accelerating to a staggering speed without any visible preparation. And shortly after the first detection, a second radar post located at Bentwaters also picked up the object on its system. Operators at Bentwaters confirmed the observations from Lakenheath, noting that the object seemed to play with the radar beams, avoiding them or diving into them with a precision that seemed to defy the capabilities of aircraft, or at least known aircraft. At about 10 p.m., an RAF Venom fighter jet was dispatched to intercept the object. The Venom pilot reported seeing a bright circular light in front of him, which didn't resemble any known aircraft. It was visibly bright and seemed to emit a pulsing glow that varied in intensity. The pilot attempted several times to approach the object, but with each attempt, the UFO accelerated, moved out of range with disconcerting ease. Weather conditions that night were clear with excellent visibility, allowing for detailed visual observations. The moon was almost full, providing natural light that helped to accentuate the visibility of the unidentified object. No clouds obstructed the view, and the wind was weak, which eliminates the possibility that what they were seeing was a weather phenomenon like a lenticular cloud or the ubiquitous weather balloon. Interaction between the UFO and the Venom lasted several minutes, during which the object continued to display maneuverability far surpassing that of a normal fighter jet. At one point, the object even approached a relatively close distance to the Venom, allowing the pilot to observe a more detailed structure. He described the object as having a spherical shape with some kind of halo around it, which made it difficult to determine its exact dimensions. After about half an hour of interception attempts, the object suddenly accelerated at a phenomenal speed and disappeared from visual and radar range. That behind a lot of questions and mysteries that persist to this day. Lakenheath-Bentwaters incident remains a fascinating case study for ufologists and researchers, offering a detailed data set that continues to challenge conventional explanations. Now, this event involves several testimonies from military personnel from two Royal Air Force air bases in England and RAF Lakenheath and RAF Bentwaters. First key witness is the air traffic controller from Bentwaters on the evening of August 13th. He noticed unidentified objects on his radar moving at extraordinary speeds and changing direction abruptly. According to his testimony, these objects are capable of accelerating from 0 to several thousand miles per hour in just a few seconds. A capability far beyond that of any known aircraft at the time. Another important witness is the fighter pilot who was sent to intercept one of the detected objects. The pilot, flying a Venom fighter plane, reported seeing a bright circular light moving at an incredible speed. He described the objects as being able to stop dead in mid-flight and instantly take off again at a dizzying speed. And despite making several attempts, he wasn't able to get close enough to the object to clearly identify it. Another testimony came from a radar operator at RAF Lakenheath, who also detected the object on his equipment. He confirms the observation of his counterpart at RAF Bentwaters, noting the object seemed to toy with the fighter plane sent to intercept them, evading them with disconcerting ease. In addition to the military, there were several civilian witnesses also reported seeing unusual lights in the sky that night. Among them was a couple living near Lakenheath who described seeing a series of bright objects moving at high speed without any engine noise, which is unusual for aircraft. These testimonies, collected independently from each other, paint a picture of an event that surpasses human understanding with the technological capabilities of the time. The descriptions of the object's movements and their ability to change directions instantly and accelerate at staggering speeds remains difficult to explain within the framework of 1956 aerial technologies. Investigation that followed involved several branches of the armed forces of the United Kingdom and the U.S., as well as government agencies. Details of the investigation were widely scrutinized by both researchers and ufologists, leading to various reports and conclusions. The investigations began immediately after radar operators at Royal Air Force, from the Royal Air Force stationed at Lakenheath in Suffolk, detected unidentified objects moving at speeds with maneuvers that exceeded the capabilities of aircraft at the time. The initial reports indicate that the objects are moving at speeds ranging from 4,000 to 8,000 miles per hour, well beyond that of any known aircraft. Testimonies collected during the investigation included those of radar operators and pilots from both the RAF and U.S. Air Force who were sent to intercept the objects. These pilots reported seeing bright lights moving at incredible speeds and making turns impossible for human aircraft. These observations were corroborated by simultaneous radar readings, reinforcing the credibility of the testimonies. Military authorities initially reacted by classifying the incident as highly confidential, and it took a number of years before details of the investigation were made public. The U.S. Air Force's Blue Book project, which was responsible for the investigation of UFOs, and initially included the Lakenheath-Bentwaters incident in its archives. And its report concluded the observations were credible, but couldn't determine the origin of the observed objects. Conclusions of the investigations were varied and often contradictory. Some reports suggested the observations could be attributed to natural phenomena or errors in interpreting radar data and visual testimonies. Yes, they wanted to say radar operators trained by both services were incompetent. However, others maintained the characteristics of the observed objects couldn't be easily explained by conventional explanations. Investigation of the Lakenheath-Bentwaters incident remains a subject of debate among researchers and ufologists. Declassified documents and testimonies collected during the investigation continue to be analyzed in the hope of finding new information or maybe more convincing explanations about what really happened during those mysterious observations in 1956. The first theory, which is often put forward by skeptics, of course, is radar error. Radars at the time were less reliable and more susceptible to atmospheric interference or other technical anomalies. Some radar technology experts suggest that unusual signals picked up could be the result of peculiar weather conditions at night, such as temperature inversions, which can cause abnormal radar reflections. Another rational explanation is that secret aircraft or undisclosed military trials. During the Cold War, the U.S. and their allies regularly tested new aerial technologies. It's possible the UFOs observed were actually prototypes of airplanes or drones unknown to the public or even the majority of the military personnel at the time. And this theory is supported by the fact the air bases involved were important strategic sites during that time period. On the side of more sensational theories, the extraterrestrial hypothesis remains the most popular among some ufologists. According to this perspective, the observed objects were vessels of non-earthly origin. Supporters of this idea cite the speed and seemingly impossible movements of the UFOs, such as instantaneous changes of direction and sudden accelerations without sonic effects, as evidence that the technologies involved couldn't be of this world. Now, a variant of the extraterrestrial hypothesis is that of the reconnaissance visit. Some theories suggest the aliens might be on an exploration or surveillance mission interested in human military capabilities, especially during the Cold War. This idea is often reinforced by reports of interactions between UFOs and military aircraft, which suggest a kind of curiosity or a study on the part of the supposed visitors. Finally, there are those who believe a more psychosocial explanation is the one that should be used. This theory suggests that the Lakenheath-Bentwaters incident could be a mass phenomenon where witnesses interpreted ambiguous stimuli through the prism of the popular culture of the time, which was associated with the science fiction narratives and fears of alien invasion. So, of course, the official reports of the time downplayed the incident, admitted the inability to explain the radar and visual observations by natural phenomena or conventional aircraft, and basically took the attitude of out of sight, out of mind. Let's talk about the RB-47 incident. There was a mysterious tracking of a UFO by an electronic bomber. It was July 17, 1957. And it covered several states, including Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Now, on July 17th, a strategic bomber, RB-47, equipped for electronic reconnaissance, encountered a UFO during a routine mission over the southern United States. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the duration of the observation. It lasted for several hours, and the fact the UFO was detected by both the crew visually and electronically by the equipment on board was a new twist. Now, the RB-47, which was part of the Air Force, was on a mission to collect electronic data and test new surveillance equipment. It was a six-man crew, highly qualified and experienced. Flight was going normally till one of the onboard electronic countermeasure operator detected an unidentified radar signal. And shortly after that, the crew members spotted a bright object that seemed to be following their trajectory. The object was described as being extremely bright and capable of high-speed maneuvers, surpassing the capabilities of any known aircraft at the time. On several occasions, the object disappeared and reappeared, moving at speeds and directions that defied conventional explanations. Despite attempts to establish communication or understand the nature of the object, the crew was unable to obtain any more information. Now, the incident was officially recorded and investigated by several agencies, including the Air Force. Despite thorough analysis, though, the origin and nature of the observed object remained unidentified. This incident remains one of the most mysterious and technically substantiated in the annals of ufology, continuing to spark curiosity and debate among UFO experts and enthusiasts. Now, as I said, there was a six-man crew, and they reported detecting an unidentified object that was not only visually observed, but also picked up by the plane's electronic equipment. Well, the observation began about 4 o'clock in the morning, local time. The plane was flying over Mississippi. The sky was clear, stars were visible, ideal conditions for aerial observation. Object was initially detected by the electronic detection system, a sophisticated equipment array designed to identify enemy radar signals. What made this incident particularly remarkable is that the object was also visually seen by the crew, which is a rare occurrence in UFO cases. The observed object was described as being luminous with an intense white light that seemed to change shape and size. Several times during the incident, the object performed high-speed maneuvers that far exceeded the capabilities of any known aircraft at the time. At one point, the object moved away at speeds estimated at several thousand kilometers per hour before it came back and rejoined the RB-47. The interaction between the UFO and the RB-47 lasted almost an hour, during which the object was lost and found several times by the plane's tracking system. Object was detected both by the onboard radar and by the electronic countermeasure equipment, indicating it was emitting or reflecting electromagnetic waves. Now, the altitude at which the object was observed varied considerably, rising and falling rapidly, which added to the confusion and intrigue of the object. At certain times, the object seemed to be behaving intelligently. Now, the weather conditions during this incident were clear. In fact, it was almost perfect visibility. It allowed the crew to have a clear view of the object for most of the observation. The moon was low on the horizon, which minimized light interference and improved observation conditions. Testimonies of the plane's crew members are, of course, crucial to understanding this complex and mysterious event. The pilot was Captain Lewis Chase. According to his testimony, the object was first detected by the aircraft's electronic equipment, which recorded unusual signals. After that, he visually spotted the UFO, describing it as a bright light that seemed to change color and brightness. He noted the object was capable of high-speed maneuvers and sudden accelerations, well beyond the capabilities of the aircraft at that time. Major Frank McClure was the electronic countermeasures officer on board, and he corroborated Chase's observation. McClure indicated the object was emitting intermittent signals that the plane's equipment could pick up, which is unusual as most airborne objects do not produce those type of signals. He also confirmed the object had been detected simultaneously by several ground radar systems, ruling out the possibility of an instrument failure. Lieutenant James McCoy, the crew's navigator, also observed the UFO. He specified the object had a very fast lateral movement capability, moving from one point to another in the sky with astonishing speed and precision. And he added on several occasions the object approached the plane before quickly moving away as if it was examining the plane. Testimony of the radar operator, Lieutenant David Brigham, particularly interesting. He reported the object appeared and disappeared from his radar screen, suggesting an ability to mask its presence or to change altitude very quickly. He also noted that attempts to communicate with the object or to obtain identification through normal air traffic control channels remained unanswered. And finally, the testimony of Sergeant Melvin Reese, another crew member specializing in electronic equipment, reinforced the observations of his colleagues. He described how the plane's electronic equipment was disrupted as the UFO approached, a rare occurrence that added an additional layer of mystery to the incident. These collective testimonies from the crew members of the RB-47 provide a coherent and detailed overview of the incident, highlighting the complexity and strangeness of the interaction between the military aircraft and the UFO. Despite the many years that have passed since this event, the details reported by the crew remain among the most credible and best documented in the history of UFO sightings. Now, the investigation into this incident began immediately after the event, of course, involving several levels of the Air Force and government agencies. Initial reactions were to verify the reliability of the equipment on board the RB-47, which were at the forefront of the technology of the time for electronic warfare and reconnaissance. The equipment in question included advanced electronic detection systems, which had recorded electronic signals emitted by the unidentified flying object. Testimonies of the RB-47 crew members were meticulously collected. Pilot, co-pilot, electronic systems operators all reported visual observations of the object, as well as simultaneous detection on their equipment. These testimonies were corroborated by ground radar recordings by other aircraft in the region at the time. The initial reports were followed by a more in-depth technical analysis. Radar data, both from the aircraft and on the ground, were examined to rule out the possibility of a false detection due to equipment malfunction or atmospheric phenomena. Radar and electronic warfare experts analyzed the frequencies and signatures of the captured signals to try to determine the nature of the object. One of the most intriguing parts of the investigation was the attempt to correlate visual observations with electronic detection. The object was described by witnesses as being luminous and capable of high-speed maneuvers with sudden changes in direction, and seemed to defy the capabilities of conventional aircraft at the time. The conclusion of the military and the government authorities were cautious, of course, often classifying the incident as unresolved. The final report suggested that despite substantial data, there wasn't enough evidence to attribute the objects to known foreign technology or natural phenomena. But the incident was not categorically attributed to extraterrestrial activities. The investigation into the RB-47 incident remains a classic example of how a UFO case can be handled with seriousness and scientific rigor, while leaving serious questions open without definitive answers. Now, declassified documents and subsequent analysis continue to arouse the interest of researchers and the public, highlighting the complexity of such incidents and the challenges associated with their interpretation. First theory suggests the UFO could be an unrecognized spy plane, maybe Soviet. During the Cold War, the presence of such a plane in American airspace would have been plausible and would have justified the secrecy and interest around the incident. But skeptics of this theory argue that the technology at the time wouldn't have allowed for such a prolonged and discreet flight, especially without being detected by other means than the RB-47. The second hypothesis suggests the object was a rare atmospheric phenomenon such as a weather balloon or an ionized cloud. These phenomena can sometimes reflect radar waves and create illusions of solid objects on radar screens, but this explanation struggles to justify the visual observations reported by the crew as well as the consistency and duration of the radar tracking. Now, the third theory, of course, is the most controversial: extraterrestrial visitation. Advocates of this theory rely on the fact the object demonstrated flight capabilities that surpassed the aeronautical technology of the time, such as sudden accelerations and very rapid changes of direction. However, this theory is often criticized for its lack of concrete evidence and its inclination towards speculation rather than rigorous scientific analysis. That the perspective is that of an instrument area or misinterpretation of the data by the RB-47 crew. Yes, this highly trained crew was dumb as a brick, who couldn't tell the difference between a UFO and a radar anomaly. The electronic instruments, though advanced, were not infallible and could be subject to malfunctions. In addition, crew fatigue or momentary unfamiliarity could have contributed to a misinterpretation of the signals. And this theory is often supported by aviation or radar technology experts who point out the limitations of the system at the time. And finally, there's another theory that suggests the possibility of a classified military operation, unknown even to certain segments of the military. That object could have been an experimental prototype tested by the U.S. or some other nation, which would explain the lack of official recognition and the evasive nature of government responsive. However, this hypothesis remains difficult to verify in the absence of disclosure of classified documents or testimonies from people involved in the operation. Well, from Mississippi, let's go to what I believe is one of the most fascinating UFO cases in the annals of UFOs. And that's the abduction of Antonio Vilas Boas out of Brazil, October 16, 1957, Minas Gerais, Brazil. San Francisco de Solis is the city. On this particular night, an unusual and disturbing event occurred in the small town of San Francisco de Solis, located in the state of Minas Gerais, Brazil. Antonio Vilas Boas, a 23-year-old farmer, was working in his fields at night to avoid the intense heat of the day. He was plowing his field under the moonlight when he noticed a strange light in the sky. He was intrigued, of course, but initially skeptical, so he continued to work, thinking he might be a plane or some other natural phenomena. But the light intensified and approached, revealing an oval shape emitting a bright red light. Panicked, he tried to flee on his tractor, but the machine stopped. He was paralyzed by some unknown force. And that's when he experienced a very extraordinary and terrifying event. It was about 1 in the morning when he noticed this light. Intrigued, of course, he observed it more closely and noticed it was an unidentified flying object. Now, the description he gave was that of an egg-shaped machine with a series of red lights around its base. The object was about 15 meters diameter and emitted an intense light that illuminated the surrounding field. It seemed to be made of a smooth, shiny metal, emitted a humming noise similar to that of an engine, but without the typical interruptions of combustion engines. The weather conditions that night were clear, only a few clouds, excellent visibility, which allowed him to clearly see the object for the entire duration of the observation. The air was fresh, no wind, ideal conditions for a prolonged observation without any kind of interference. The UFO began to slowly descend toward the ground at a distance of about 100 meters from where he was located. Now, of course, he was scared but fascinated, and he tried to get a better position to observe the object. As he approached, the UFO reacted by increasing its altitude and then stabilized. He noted the object seemed to monitor his movements and reacted accordingly. After a few minutes of mutual observation, the UFO projected a beam of light toward him, and he felt an intense heat, like he was being exposed to a concentrated sunlight beam. Overwhelmed by the heat and the fear, he decided to leave, but found that his movements were hindered as if the air around him had become denser. The UFO continued to hover in the area for about an hour, sometimes changing position, but always staying nearby. And eventually, it began to slowly rise into the air and gradually accelerate until it disappeared from view, leaving behind a trail of light that faded into the night sky. Well, according to his testimony, the incident began about 11 p.m. while he was plowing the field, when he spotted this reddish light in the sky. He thought it was a star, of course, but the light grew and transformed into a form of an aerial vessel. He tried to escape on his tractor, as I said, but it broke down. Now, this ship, described as having a circular shape with a dome on top, landed in a nearby field, and 3 beings dressed in grayish suits and wearing helmets emerged from the craft. And they were about 1.5 meters tall. He was quickly captured by these creatures who took him inside their ship. Inside, he was stripped and coated with a gel. They took samples of his blood from his chin, and he was subsequently led into another room where he met a woman with blonde hair and blue eyes who seemed to be of the same species as those that had captured him. According to Antonio, he and this woman were forced to have sexual intercourse with what he believes was the aim of creating a hybrid offspring. After this act, he was guided through several rooms of the ship where he observed numerous technical details, including control panels and luminous screens. Beings communicated with each other through sounds resembling barks and growls, but he didn't understand what they said. About 4 hours after his abduction, he was released. Found his tractor and went back home, where he recounted the incident to his family. The next day, he suffered from symptoms such as nausea and headaches and eye burns, skin lesions, which he attributed to exposure to radiation. Now, this particular case has been widely studied by ufologists and remains a classic example cited in discussions about alleged extraterrestrial encounters. Despite skeptics who doubt the veracity of the story, the details provided by Antonio have been consistent, and he maintained his version of these events throughout his life. The investigation ran shortly after he shared his experience with Dr. Fontes, a renowned doctor and ufologist of the time. Fontes took the case very seriously and conducted in-depth interviews with Vilas Boas, gathered details about the physical appearance of the beings he met, technology of their spacecraft, and the nature of their interactions with him, including an alleged medical examination and nonverbal communication. Fontes also collected soil samples from the place where Vilas Boas claimed the UFO landed. These samples were examined for possible traces of radiation and other anomalies. Although the results were not conclusive, they did add a layer of mystery to the case, as slightly elevated levels of radiation were detected, although this could in fact be attributed to natural causes. In addition to Fontes' investigation, the case was examined by several other researchers and UFO organizations. These investigations often focused on verifying the consistency of his story and on search for corroborating evidence or similar testimonies. Despite considerable efforts, no definitive proof has ever been found to support or completely refute his claims. The Brazilian military and government authorities are also informed of the incident, but their level of involvement in the case is not very clear. Declassified documents from the following year suggest some monitoring of UFO reports in the region. A few documents specific to the Vilas Boas case have ever been made public. This has led to speculation about the degree of seriousness in which the incident was taken by his own government. Testimonies collected during the investigation, mainly those of Vilas Boas himself, were of crucial importance. He provided a detailed and coherent account, described the beings as humanoids with distinct features, also described complex interactions, including communication by gestures and strange medical procedures. These details fascinated the public and the researchers, but also raised questions about the possibility of psychological suggestion or hallucinatory experiences. In conclusion, although the investigation into the abduction of Antonio Vilas Boas didn't provide conclusive evidence, it did play an important role in the study of UFO phenomena. It highlighted the challenges associated with verifying extraterrestrial encounters and simulated a broader debate on how such claims should be handled by researchers and authorities. Now, of course, there are a number of theories. The first one, and the most obvious for believers in the UFO phenomenon, is that the extraterrestrial visitation. According to this hypothesis, Antonio Vilas Boas would have been abducted by beings from another planet interested in studying the human species. This theory is supported by the detailed account he gave when he described beings with tight-fitting suits and helmets, as well as various medical procedures in which he would have been subjected, to include a kind of sperm collection. Another theory put forth is that of hallucination or psychosis. Some skeptics, of course, suggest Vilas Boas could have been suffering from a form of temporary delirium, triggered by isolation in his field at night, or maybe by stress. Skeptics also point to the lack of physical evidence and the fact that Vilas Boas' story contains elements that be interpreted as fantasies or projections of unconscious desires. The third theory concerned a possible confusion with natural phenomena or military experiments. Some have speculated Vilas Boas could have witnessed a weather balloon, of course, or the type of experimental craft misinterpreted due to fear and surprise. This hypothesis is often reinforced by the context of the Cold War, a period in which numerous undisclosed military tests were taking place. And finally, there are those who believe the incident could have been staged. This theory suggests that Vilas Boas could have invented or exaggerated his story for some unknown reason, such as seeking attention or other personal gain. But this theory is often refuted by the seriousness with which Vilas Boas reported the event and by the consistent details of his account over time. Was he raped by an alien? It's never been disproven. But then again, it's never been proven. Let's go to Levelland, Texas, November 2nd, 1957. Levelland is located in northwest Texas. Small town, was at the time a quiet community mainly focused on agriculture. But on the evening of November 2nd, 1957, it would forever mark the town in the annals of unidentified phenomena. All started when locals and residents began to report sightings of an intense light source and a cigar-shaped object hovering in the sky or landing on the road. These testimonies were not isolated. They came from several people at various locations around the town over a period of a few hours. What makes these reports particularly credible is the similarity of the descriptions of the objects and the electromagnetic effects it allegedly caused, such as the stopping of vehicle engines and the failure of headlights, which was reported by several witnesses. Local authorities, including the chief of police, investigated these reports. Although he was skeptical at first, the police chief himself observed the mysterious object, adding a layer of truth to the citizens' claims. Reports were taken seriously enough for the case to be subsequently examined by the Air Force Project Blue Book, a series of UFO studies conducted by the United States Air Force. Now, the Levelland incident remains a classic case cited in UFO studies, illustrating the complexity and mystery surrounding UFO observations, as well as the challenges associated with their investigation. Despite inquiries and analysis, no definitive explanations have ever been provided, leaving the Levelland incident as a fascinating example of a close encounter and a subject of ongoing speculation among UFO experts and enthusiasts. Now, according to the story, that evening about 10:30 p.m., the first testimonies began to pour in from the small town. Weather conditions were clear, no precipitation, a light breeze was blowing from the southeast. Therefore, visibility was excellent, which allowed the witnesses to clearly observe the events. First report came from a motorist who contacted Hudnall County Sheriff to report a strange and luminous object on the road. According to his testimony, while he was driving, his vehicle suddenly began to have electrical problems and the engine shut off. Looking up, he saw a disc-shaped object about 60 meters in diameter, emitting an intense blue-green light. The object was stationary, floating a few meters above the ground. After a few minutes, the object rose into the sky at a dizzying speed and vanished. After which the witness's car was able to be restarted without any problems. Over the next hours, several other incidents, residents of Levelland reported similar sightings. All reported an oval or circular-shaped object with intense lights, mainly a blue-green color. Testimonies agreed that the approach of the object had the effect of stopping the engines of the vehicles and turning off their lights, which suggested a kind of electromagnetic interference. Another witness, a local farmer, reported seeing the object land in the field near his house. He described the UFO as being as bright as white-hot metal and noted it emitted intense heat that was perceptible even from a distance. The object remained on the ground for about a minute before it took off vertically at an incredible high speed. In total, more than 15 people reported similar observations that night in Levelland. The description of the object and the effects on the vehicles were remarkably consistent among the different witnesses, despite the fact they were in different locations around town. Reports were taken seriously enough that the sheriff and several of his deputies conducted patrols in the area in the hope of seeing the object themselves. And although they did not witness the UFO, they confirmed the electrical disturbances in their own vehicles. That evening, several witnesses reported seeing an unidentified object accompanied by strange phenomena which affected their vehicles. A number of details of the observation made by the main witnesses were fairly similar. Pedro Saucedo and Joe Salaz, two of the first witnesses, reported seeing a torpedo-shaped object crossing the sky. According to their testimony, the object emitted an intense light and seemed to cause electrical interference as their truck began to have engine problems. Their headlights went out as soon as the object approached. After the object disappeared, the vehicle was able to be restarted without any problem. Jim Wheeler, another witness, saw the large, bright, disc-shaped object on the road in front of him, blocking his path. He described the object as about 200 feet wide, emitting a light so bright it almost blinded him. His vehicle also stopped working and the headlights went out as he got close to the object. Frank Williams, a resident of Levelland, also encountered a UFO. He described a similar object that caused his engine to stop, his headlights to go out. As soon as the UFO left, he was able to restart his vehicle with no problems. Ronald Martin, another witness, reported a similar experience. There was a bright object on the road that caused his engine to stop, the headlights of his car to go out. Once it took off, he was able to restart with no problem. Sheriff Ware Clem and his deputy also witnessed the incident. They were called to investigate the reports and saw a bright object themselves that quickly disappeared on the horizon. These testimonies, collected independently from each other, present striking similarities, not only the presence of a luminous object and electromagnetic interference causing vehicle breakdowns. These observations were taken very seriously at the time and were subject of investigation by the American Air Force under Project Blue Book. But despite many similarities between the testimonies, no definitive explanation has been provided by the authorities, leaving this incident as one of the great unsolved mysteries of ufology. The official investigation was primarily conducted by Blue Book, which was then the program responsible for studying unidentified aerial phenomena. The incident began on the evening of November 2nd, 1957, when residents of the small town began to report sightings of a cigar-shaped object emitting intense light, which allegedly caused electromagnetic interference affecting vehicles. Testimonies indicated that car engines would shut off and the headlights would go out. As the object got closer, it would restart after it departed. Faced with the rapid accumulation of testimony, the local sheriff contacted the Air Force to report the incidents. Project Blue Book dispatched Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend to Levelland to conduct the investigation, and he collected testimonies from several eyewitnesses, including police officers, farmers, and motorists. The description of the object and its effects on the vehicles are remarkably consistent across the various reports. One of the first tasks of the investigation was to verify the possibility of a conventional explanation, such as unusual weather conditions or some secret military activity. But no military activity was scheduled in that area at that time, and the weather conditions were clear without any electrical storm that could have caused such interference, and there were no weather balloons. The investigation also examined the possibility of a hoax or even mass hysteria. But the credibility of the witnesses and the consistency of their accounts made this hypothesis unlikely. Moreover, the physical effects reported on the vehicles were difficult to simulate. After several days of field investigation and analysis of testimonies, the final report of the Blue Book Project concluded the incident was probably not due to a paranormal extraterrestrial phenomena. The report suggested that witnesses may have misinterpreted natural phenomena such as ball lightning or mirages. Of course, this silly-ass conclusion was widely criticized, both by the UFO community and by some scientists who found the proposed explanation unsatisfactory in light of reported physical effects. Levelland incident remains an important case study in ufology, often cited as an example of how official investigations into UFO can be insufficient or geared toward conventional explanations, even in the presence of solid evidence of abnormal phenomena. The archives of Project Blue Book, including reports on the Levelland incident, have been declassified and are accessible to the public, which allows an ongoing analysis by researchers and those interested. And as usual, there were a number of theories, the first one being extraterrestrial visitation. This hypothesis is based on testimonies of observers who've described the object as being of a technology clearly superior to that at the time. And the simultaneous breakdown of several vehicles reported by witnesses is often interpreted as evidence of advanced technological capabilities, possibly intended to avoid confrontation or more detailed observation. Another theory put forward is that of a rare natural phenomena such as fireball storms or ball lightning. Skeptics of the extraterrestrial theory suggest what the witnesses saw can be attributed to natural electromagnetic phenomena such as ball lightning. And this hypothesis is reinforced by the fact that Levelland incident occurred during a period of high storm activity. Critics of this theory, though, point out that the witnesses' description did not match the known characteristics of ball lightning, particularly in terms of size and behavior of the object. And of course, a third speculation revolves around secret military operations. That's almost as silly as weather balloons. During the Cold War, the U.S. tested a lot of new aircraft and technologies. Some researchers suggest the observed object could be a prototype of an experimental plane or a drone, whose presence in the Texas sky would have been concealed under the guise of a UFO to maintain the confidentiality of the project. And of course, less popular, but certainly on the table, is collective hallucination. According to this, witnesses would have undergone a kind of mass psychosis. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about on Monday. This is Friday. And talk more about mass UFO incidents. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.